It was a quiet Sunday evening in Warri, Delta State. The Youth Fellowship of Deeper Life Bible Church had just concluded their weekly meeting. The hall still carried the echoes of youthful hymns, the sound of Bible pages turning, and the gentle hum of conversation among the young believers preparing to go home. Among them was Brother Samuel, a 20-year-old welder, known by many as one of the most committed young men in the fellowship. Samuel had completed his secondary education a few years earlier and had learned welding as a trade. He was industrious, responsible, and already earning a decent income. To most people in the youth group, he represented the ideal young believer, hardworking, independent, and deeply spiritual. His voice was familiar in the youth choir, where he sang with passion and sincerity. His life revolved around three things: his business, his church, and his God. He avoided distractions, stayed away from worldly company, and carried an unmistakable zeal for holiness. When other young men joked or flirted, Samuel would remind them of purity and godliness. He was the kind of youth leader older members loved to quote, a young man focused on eternity. In the same choir stood Sister Priscilla, a 17-year-old whose gentle voice often melted hearts during worship. She was quiet, respectful, and modest, the type of young lady who embodied everything Deeper Life stood for. Her commitment was evident in her consistency. She was always punctual, always humble, and always spiritually alert. Though both were young, Samuel and Priscilla shared a common trait, a burning desire to please God. They had grown up in the same church environment, learning the same doctrines about purity, separation from the world, and the sacredness of marriage. Their paths crossed frequently during rehearsals and youth fellowship, and soon, what began as fellowship admiration began to grow into something deeper. The love and the burden. For months, Samuel found himself drawn to Priscilla's quiet spirit and dedication. It wasn't the kind of attraction the world celebrates, it was something he believed was spiritually inspired. He admired her devotion, her prayer life, and her discipline. To him, she represented the kind of woman Proverbs 31 described, virtuous, humble, and God-fearing. In his private prayers, he began to ask God for direction. He wanted to be sure that what he felt was not infatuation but divine revelation. The messages he heard in church often emphasized the dangers of fornication and the importance of marriage for those who desired to live pure lives. Samuel interpreted these lessons literally. He reasoned that since he was financially stable, spiritually grounded, and emotionally ready, early marriage could be the godly path to avoid temptation. He intensified his prayers, setting aside time for fasting and meditation. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, until one evening, he felt convinced that God had spoken. In his heart, he heard what he believed was a confirmation. Sister Priscilla was his wife. He was filled with excitement, a sense of divine approval that made him both joyful and restless. Samuel knew the next step. In Deeper Life, marriage was not a personal arrangement but a process overseen by the marriage committee, a group of elders and ministers responsible for guiding members through the path of choosing a life partner according to church doctrine. Every union had to go through this committee for spiritual and moral approval. So, with great faith and enthusiasm, Samuel decided to take his conviction to the committee. To him, it wasn't just a formality, it was a testimony of obedience. He wanted the church to confirm what he already believed God had revealed. That decision marked the beginning of one of the most defining chapters of his life. The request before the committee. The meeting with the marriage committee was held on a Sunday afternoon, shortly after the church service. Samuel arrived early, his heart beating fast but steady with confidence. He had rehearsed his words, prayed for favor, and believed he was about to fulfill God's will for his life. When his name was called, he stepped into the modest office where three elders sat behind a long wooden table. Their faces were calm, seasoned with wisdom, and their voices carried the weight of spiritual authority. Samuel greeted them respectfully and was asked to state his purpose. Without hesitation, he spoke clearly and passionately. "Brethren," he began, "I have prayed, and God has revealed to me the sister I am to marry. Her name is Sister Priscilla, from the youth choir." For a moment, there was silence. The elders exchanged quiet glances and smiled faintly. One of them nodded, acknowledging Samuel's confidence. Then came the gentle but firm voice of the chairman. "Brother Samuel," he said, "we thank God for your zeal and the sincerity of your heart. It is good that you desire to marry in the Lord. But may we ask, how old are you?" "I am 20 years old, sir," Samuel replied with pride. "I have finished secondary school, and I am working as a welder. I make enough to take care of a family." The elders listened attentively. One of them smiled again and adjusted his glasses. "That's good," he said softly. But do you think you are ready for the lifelong responsibilities of marriage? Have you considered continuing your education or building more stability first? Samuel nodded but insisted that God's will must be obeyed promptly. He argued that waiting could expose him to temptation, and since he already had an income, he saw no reason to delay. The committee commended his honesty but remained firm. "Brother Samuel," one elder said, "we understand your desire to live holy and avoid sin, but spiritual readiness is not the same as emotional or physical maturity. Marriage is not just about provision, it's about patience, responsibility, and understanding. We believe you should take more time to grow before entering into it." The discussion went on for several minutes, with the committee carefully explaining that zeal must be guided by wisdom. At the end, they advised him to focus on personal development, to strengthen his spiritual walk, expand his trade, and continue serving faithfully in the choir. They assured him that if what he claimed was truly from God, it would stand even after time and testing. But Samuel left that meeting unconvinced, believing his faith had just been misunderstood. 4. The age factor and final decision. After the meeting, the marriage committee decided to make discreet inquiries about Sister Priscilla. They wanted to confirm her background, spiritual standing, and age, all standard procedures in deeper life's marriage process. What they found added weight to their earlier caution. Priscilla was only 17 years old, still a teenager, fresh out of secondary school, and preparing to seek admission into a tertiary institution. According to church policy, both parties must be of mature age, physically, mentally, and spiritually, before marriage can be approved. The leadership had long emphasized that youthful enthusiasm must never override sound judgment. In this case, both Samuel and Priscilla were still in the early stages of their lives, and the elders saw it as premature and potentially harmful to encourage such a union. With that understanding, the committee reached a firm decision. The proposal could not proceed. When Samuel was called back for a follow-up meeting, the elders spoke with gentleness but finality. They explained the findings and repeated their advice, to focus on personal and professional growth. They encouraged him to build his career, consider further education, and allow God's will to unfold in its own time. They reminded him that if it was truly divine, it would not fade with delay. In their words, the will of God is never in a hurry. When it is truly His plan, time will only make it clearer. But for Samuel, those words did not bring peace. What the committee saw as godly caution, he saw as rejection. What they intended as fatherly guidance, he took as human interference. As he walked away from the church compound that day, he carried with him not submission, but a growing seed of frustration that would later shape the course of his life. The frustration and misunderstanding. When Samuel left the marriage committee meeting that day, his heart was heavy. The same church that had nurtured him, the same people who had celebrated his zeal, suddenly felt like strangers. He walked home in silence, feeling wounded and misunderstood. To him, it wasn't just a no from the committee, it was a rejection of what he believed was God's voice. He replayed the conversation over and over in his mind. Each word of counsel now sounded like criticism. Too young to marry, they had said. Not yet ready, they had advised. But in his heart, Samuel could not see wisdom in their words. All he heard was doubt about his maturity, his vision, and even his ability to hear from God. In the days that followed, Samuel's disappointment deepened into frustration. He avoided eye contact with the elders, skipped youth meetings, and began to withdraw from his friends in the choir. Whenever someone tried to talk about faith or patience, he brushed it off with a bitter smile. His prayer life weakened, replaced by silent resentment. To those who knew him, the change was alarming. The once vibrant brother who led songs of worship now sat quietly at the back of the church, until he stopped coming altogether. His friends reached out, but their words felt shallow to him. They could not understand what he felt, that he had been spiritually betrayed by the very system he had trusted. Within a few months, Samuel stopped attending services completely. He told himself that if the church could not believe in what God told him, then perhaps he didn't belong there anymore. It wasn't long before he began to seek fellowship elsewhere, somewhere that, in his mind, would not stand in the way of God's will. And just like that, a young man once on fire for God quietly drifted away, not because of sin, but because of misunderstanding. What was meant to be fatherly guidance became, in his perception, rejection. The seed of offense had taken root, and it would take years for him to understand what had truly happened. The years that followed. Life went on, as it always does. Samuel found another church in Warri, one where the rules were less strict, and the leadership encouraged early marriage among disciplined youths. The atmosphere felt freer, and for the first time in a long while, he felt accepted again. Within a short period, he met another young woman who shared his passion for ministry. Their friendship grew quickly, and without the kind of extensive vetting he once faced, they were married within a year. Samuel was happy. He believed he had finally proven that he was ready for marriage after all. The years rolled by. Samuel became a responsible husband and a proud father of 3 children. His welding business expanded. He employed apprentices, bought a plot of land, and eventually built a modest but comfortable home. On the surface, life seemed stable, a picture of success and fulfillment. Yet, every once in a while, during quiet evenings when he sat on his veranda, memories would return. He would think of the youth choir, the laughter, the preaching, and the committee room where his dream had been crushed. Sometimes he wondered, what if he had waited? What if he had trusted the elders' counsel instead of reacting out of pain? Though he never returned to deeper life, the lessons of his early years there never truly left him. His children grew up hearing bits of his story, how he was once a zealous young brother who wanted to do God's will, and how his journey took a turn he never expected. In his heart, there remained both gratitude and regret. Gratitude for how God still blessed him despite his impatience, and regret for the spiritual peace he once had and lost along the way. The reflection and lessons. Samuel's story raises a timeless question. How should a believer balance zeal with maturity? Passion with patience? Faith with wisdom? These are the crossroads where many young Christians find themselves today. In spiritual matters, it is possible to have a genuine conviction and still be wrong in approach. Samuel's mistake was not that he wanted to marry or that he believed God spoke to him. His mistake was that he failed to understand divine timing. True revelation is not proven by how early it comes, but by how well it endures. The marriage committee's role was not to oppose him, but to protect both him and Sister Priscilla from decisions that could derail their destinies. The elders had seen many stories like his, young people burning with sincere but immature passion, only to later realize that what they called revelation was simply emotion mixed with desire. Spiritual conviction must always be balanced with counsel. Proverbs 11 verse 14 says, "In the multitude of counselors, there is safety." The church's wisdom was never against Samuel's calling. It was only a safeguard to ensure that his calling matured properly. Unfortunately, emotional immaturity can twist correction into rejection. It can make loving discipline feel like personal attack. That's what happened to Samuel, and to many young believers who confuse human delay with divine denial. The truth is that God's timing often requires patience. What he reveals today, he may fulfill years later. But when impatience takes over, it can lead us to make decisions that fall short of his perfect will. Samuel's life would later prove that what he needed most at 20 was not a wife, but wisdom. Samuel's story is not just about a failed marriage proposal. It is a parable about waiting, obedience, and understanding God's order. For today's generation of Christian youths, it stands as a mirror, showing how passion, when unchecked by patience, can lead to premature choices. The marriage committee never denied the possibility that God could have spoken to him. They only insisted that time should prove it. But Samuel, blinded by youthful zeal, took their caution as opposition. 20 years later, he would come to see the wisdom behind their restraint. The lesson is simple yet profound. When God speaks, time will test it. True revelation is never threatened by waiting. Divine purpose never contradicts divine order. What is truly from God will remain unshaken by delay or discouragement.